Yeah. Yeah.
What is going on, guys, and welcome to the first live personal league podcast that we've done. This is for the league Fourth and Drunk. They are veterans to this. They have done this before, but they've never done it live before. So we are doing it live tonight. Before I introduce the entire panel here, I want to explain what a personal league podcast is for those that may not know. Basically, we get your rosters, we look at your rosters, and we break down your team. We rank them from 12 to 1. We count them down on the podcast, and we break each team down individually. So if you'd like one of these done for your league, you can go to goingfor2.com/PLP. It's down there on the scroller, the ticker down the bottom there. So if you forget, you can definitely go there and find it. But let me go ahead and introduce the panel now. First up, we have Mr. Kyle. I think if I was to list the podcast that he wasn't on, it'd probably be a shorter list. But the two that he does for us are press coverage and the Dynasty Gambit. You can follow him on Twitter at Senra Says. What's up, Kyle?
Hey, everyone. Happy to be back for Fourth and Drunk once again.
Yes, sir. Joining us tonight as well, as this will be his first personal league podcast that he's done, Jordon. He is a co-host on the Cover Zero IDP podcast. You can follow him on Twitter at Dr. Fantasy Sports. What's up, Jordon?
Not much. Happy to be here.
Good stuff. Zach, he was our Going for Two live Sunday morning pregame show host, and he's going to be having his new show starting up here pretty soon called the Balmanac Podcast. It'll be a 2-hour show on Saturday. What's up, Zach?
What's up? Just ready for another year of PLP action. It's been too long.
Good stuff. And yeah, you can follow him on Twitter at the Big Pulowski. And last but not least, the other half of the Cover Zero IDP podcast, Jerry. You can follow him on Twitter at Jerry Wilkie FM. What's up, Jerry?
What's going on, everybody? Go Bills.
All right, good stuff. So real quick, I want to explain how we did this. Basically, we got your rosters. These guys ranked your rosters from 1 to 12, with 1 being the team they'd most want to take over, 12 being the team they would least like to take over, and we created a consensus ranking out of that, which we'll count down tonight on the podcast. I then assigned each of these 4 gentlemen 3 teams to be the expert of. So when we get to those teams in the countdown, they will break down your team strengths, weaknesses, maybe some trade advice, draft pick wise, what they would do if they owned your team, etc. So let's go ahead and jump right into the first team.
Number 12.
All right, the number 12 team was ranked as high as number 11, as low as number 12. It was nearly a consensus 12. We did have one person with an 11 ranking, and it is Z Gardio. And Kyle, this is your team. Go ahead and break this team down here for us.
Yeah, so the first thing I do want to break down, though, is kind of more of a general concept. Again, looking at the league settings, always the first place to look. Minimum start 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, and 2 flex. That takes up basically about half of the starting lineup, even a little more than half of it, and full PPR. So just looking at those settings, knowing it's 1 quarterback, 1 tight end, and there's no tight end premium, I really do feel like the teams in this league really should build around running back and wide receiver. And specifically at wide receiver, though, again, knowing that everyone has to start 3, but ideally could start up to 5. That means the threshold of the wide receivers that should be rostered, or where you should roster your receivers within. At the very least, if you take assumption everyone has to start 3 every week, that means 36 receivers are going to be in everyone's starting lineup no matter what. Now, looking at this team, Z Garrido, they've got, I would say, 1 receiver that I view as a top 36, George Pickens. And I was looking at just reviewing my Dynasty rankings today and updating them. I do have him as a top 36 receiver, but just barely. I think something like wide receiver 33. So my first move for this team is needing to add to this wide receiver room and add to the point where Pickens isn't the wide receiver 1. He's maybe the wide receiver 3, but I think even ideally prefer him as a wide receiver 4 or as a flex option. But I think at the very least, I think the first 2 priorities are getting the 2 receivers. Knowing this team has 223 firsts, I think my first move would try to be, what's the best receiver I can get for one of those first, and trying to potentially accumulate 2 wide receivers. The consensus ranking is 12, so maybe this team we view it anyway as maybe a rebuild. So the need to contend this year isn't necessarily they have to, but I think investing into young wide receivers is a good way to spend draft capital, even when a team isn't looking to compete right away in year one. But if things change, again, having those receivers producing can help with that. So I would, because we don't actually have the standings to know where these picks are, but knowing
I
how
just
we
brought it
rank.
up on the screen for you there, Kyle. He's got the 107 and the 111.
Oh, interesting. I'd expected them to be later, considering where we have those teams ranked. But that's maybe a little foreshadowing for later. But later first like that, I think that's what I would try to do is probably even use both to try and get younger receivers. You're looking maybe below the age of 25 right now that can be productive and you can consider to be top 30. I'd really look at like top 24 options, and again, really create Pickens as the wide receiver 3 on the team instead of the wide receiver 1.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think, just by doing a few early mocks, now granted, it's really early in the process with mock drafts, but there's a drop off at pick 106. It's like there's a top consensus 6 players in one quarterback leagues, and then there's a pretty good drop off. So I agree with you, at least early in the process, trying to move up to get, another pick there. I do like that idea. Go ahead.
Well, I think the second move I would add is if that can get done and can add to the top of this wide receiver depth chart or wide receiver room with I think this team could afford to get rid of some of the wide receiver depth at the bottom end. Guys like Calvin Austin, Rashard Higgins. I don't really want to roster those are kind of roster cloggers where if you I think maybe the reason they're on this team is because there's so little wide receiver depth at the top, but if that's added to from the top, you can take away from the bottom. And I think the point of that may be taken away from some of the tight end depth. 6 tight ends rostered, and again, no tight end premium. I'm pretty sure that's the most. One other team, I believe, has 6 tight ends, but a lot of the teams in this league are rostering 3, 4, 5. So I think this team can afford to flat out cut some of these tight ends. Noah Gray, Taysom Hill, Robert Tonyan. I'd be fine cutting those 3, cutting Calvin Austin, cutting Rashard Higgins. The tight end wise, you get the rotation of David Njoku, Dawson Knox, where Harrison Bryant acts as David Njoku's backup. I guess we'll see where Njoku does end up. Or wait, I forget. Did he sign no, he's about to be a free agent.
Who's that?
Njoku, I believe.
Njoku, yeah, I believe so.
So potentially that's 3 starters if he leaves and Bryant takes the starting job. But I would kind of just build around those 3 tight ends and getting rid of those, Austin and Higgins. That basically opens up 5 roster spots to double the running back depth. This team has only 5 running backs rostered. I think it should probably be, like I said, at least double that and try to get to double-digit running backs. And that'll be the way that this team can compete, maybe without an elite running back. But if they have enough depth, they can fill those 2 spots. And again, trading for wide receivers to not just fill the 3 starting receiver spots, but also the 2 flexes makes it so you don't have to stress at running back as much. So that's kind of how I view this team in general. I don't know if that was specific enough for everyone.
Yeah, no, I get that. And Jamie did remind me, Njoku just did sign a big contract, so he is not going to be a free agent next year. I forgot he signed that big contract there before the season started.
Me too, clearly. Thanks, Jamie.
There's one thing I wanted to talk about too is just, going back to the receivers, this team, and I think you might agree, Kyle, is probably not competing this year. So running backs, drafting them, I don't think is something you're going to want to do because you're not going to compete. You want to get those receivers that are going to have that, longevity. Maybe next year's draft, you start looking at getting the higher end running backs. I know there's some good running backs in this draft, especially towards the top. But I think receivers just have that longevity. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. And that's kind of what I was all saying. Like if you can't, trust the receivers you're going to draft with those picks to trade for veteran receivers that are still relatively young is I think the ideal thing that way. You kind of just almost bypass that entirely and focus more on the 24 picks and could, really accumulate. And that might be the year where you can go in and draft the running backs.
Yeah.
But I definitely think the priority is to fix this wide receiver room.
All right, let's get to team number 11.
Number 11.
Team number 11 was ranked as high as 10, as low as 12, and it is Bach 514. Let me get his roster pulled up on the screen here. And Zach, this is your team.
This team is something. When I looked at this roster, it said to me, hey, we had a COVID startup in 2020, and this is the remaining team that never made any transactions from that initial startup. For some reason, when I looked at this lineup, I was like, oh, back 514, 504 days or 514 days ago is probably the last time they made a trade, just based off this roster construct. There are nice pieces, but when I'm looking at it, man, it looks as if something that you would have constructed with the hopes of Carson Wentz in the future, or Miles Sanders actually being a full-time RB1 without a committee in Philly. There's a lot of pieces on this roster that I like, but I think it's time you need to just cut ties, sell them for what they're worth, and run while you can, because there's a lot of aging pieces, essentially at every position, that I think they're doing more harm than good sitting on your roster at this point. Kirk Cousins is a respectable QB option. I think he can help you. He's not going to hurt you if you're trying to compete, but at the same time, you realistically don't even need 4 quarterbacks rostered in this format. I know Kyle was referencing that with some of the tight end stuff as well, but when it's a 1 QB league, you really don't need guys, especially like maybe a Matt Corral or Carson Wentz. Probably just send them to the curb, try and stack up on more running backs, wide receivers there. With the running back room specifically, though, there weren't a lot of guys that I really saw with long-term upside and hope. Spiller and Chandler are probably like the long shot. Not really much expectations there, but there's maybe some long-term hope. But otherwise, Sanders, Connor, Edwards-Helaire, we kind of know what we have there. Maybe it's even past its prime with what you have there. So that's where see what you can get for him this offseason. I wouldn't wait any longer. The age always scares me there. Someone like James Conner, what I want to say is he 28, 27, about to be 20. I don't want to sit on that any longer when someone might be contending, trying to get that RB3, RB4. I mean, there's other rosters as we get further along that I'll allude to for potential trade targets. But this team right now just has a lot of holes and, relative bright spots. I mean, I like the draft equity. I like having your picks, TJ Hawkinson, Devonta Smith. I'm excited about some of that. But at the same time, the wide receiver room, too, there's so many guys I would have been excited about in 2020, 2019. There's a lot of those names where, this was their next year. Never came. And that's
happened.
Curtis Samuel, Paris Campbell, Van Jefferson, Laviska, Devontae Parker, Sterling Shepard, all guys at some point I've heard the case for, but I think essentially all of them, we know what we're getting now. And that's where if someone wants them, maybe try and get any sort of asset that you can. But I'm starting a full rebuild if this is my team. There's not enough in play where I feel like I can really progress into a contender spot. And at that point, I need to cut my losses rather than just sitting on these assets before they depreciate anymore.
Yeah, I'm with you. Kyle, I want to ask you real quick because this team is in a similar struggle as the one you just broke down, but they have the 102. How does that change your strategy on the draft picks? Because you were talking about moving up and getting them. But he has the 102 though. Are you moving back to get more picks? Or are you just picking with the 102?
Yeah, I mean, moving back might not be the worst idea if you could take multiple shots. This is another team. They've got bodies at wide receiver, like it's 11 players deep, but there's a few of those that are roster cloggers. You're 3, maybe up to 4 guys that you probably just outright cut and hopefully replace with at very least rookies should even be upgrades on them. But
this is the team I'm trading back.
Yeah.
It just seems like too much opportunity. Sorry, go ahead, Kyle.
Well, the only other option would be, I guess the wide receiver depth is so lackey that it'd be tough to trade up and take Bijan because that he would instantly come in and be the running back one on this team, and you'd get with Zach's earlier problem of it's an older running back team. It at least gets younger that way, but it also may not be a team that's quite ready to have Bijan yet. And
I think Bijan is used goods if he comes to a team like this. They need more than a elite running back right now. I mean, I think obviously Bijan on any roster makes the roster look better. Who are we kidding? But with this wide receiver room and Hawkinson, just depending on the week, I might try and flip someone like Hawkinson to someone that's more pro Minnesota, where they're going to see more of the high volume post trade and try and invest in that, where I might sell him on that belief because I don't know for certain. And I think there's just a lot of question marks with this roster right now where, if you can trade back from pick 2 to pick 4 or something like that, and you're getting additional assets to retool all those depth pieces of guys you don't even need to keep rostered, I think that's going to be your best benefit there.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And when I was talking about that cliff earlier, the 101 through the 106, it's 2 running backs and 4 receivers. And those receivers are pretty, depending on who you talk to, they're pretty clumped up. So if you move back even to the 106, you're still getting a pretty good receiver that you can then also add more assets to your draft picks as well. So like that idea. All right, let's get to the next team here.
Number 10.
The number 10 team was ranked as high as number 9, as low as number 11, and it is Mark Farrer 1. And Jerry, this is your team here. Go ahead and give us your breakdown.
All right. So he's got serviceable quarterbacks. Derek Carr could possibly get a starting job somewhere. He might have lucked into another year of Tannehill because Malik Willis didn't really look too good this year. And obviously you got Matthew Stafford coming back. So it's another team that has 4 quarterbacks. 3 of them could be usable on any given week, play the matchups. I mean, it's hard to sell, especially when people are carrying 4 quarterbacks. 4 or more quarterbacks, it's hard to try to sell one to upgrade. So at least you got bodies that are going to start. Just got to play the right ones. Running backs, it's not the strongest room, but again, it's serviceable. He's got Austin Eckler, who on any given week is a top 3 to 5 running back when he's healthy. Where I would go is I would look to see how the team's going around week 5, week 6, see how things are going. And if things are sour, maybe try to sell him off for some pieces because he is getting up there in age. If you're doing good, 4-2, 5-1, hold on to him and see if you can make a run with him, depending on what other moves that you make this offseason and make your team better. James Cook, he's an absolute favorite. He's a buy and target for me in all dynasty formats. Singletary is an unrestricted free agent this year. This could be his backfield next year. We saw it a little bit this year that they started to run the ball a little bit more. Obviously, by the hat, I'm a Bills fan. I watch him every week. For the past 4, 5, 6 weeks, he's been seeing about 35 to 40% of the field. So he is it's much different than the beginning of the season. He's starting to see the ball a lot more, see the field a lot more. He's a piece that I'm going to build around. So whether you keep Eckler or not, I'm holding on to James Cook. He's one of my favorite pieces on this team. Fournette, he might have some juice left. He could be usable a couple weeks. Got to see what ends up with him. I think Tampa's going to enter a rebuild now with Tom Brady potentially not being there. So it all depends on if he continues to stay there, if he goes to sign like a RB2 role somewhere, because he's not going to be a bell cow anymore. Jalen Warren is another solid piece. We saw a lot of him this year, kind of expelling Najee Harris. I think what we saw is Najee's going to get a lot of work, but he's not the 100% true bell cow that people drafted him to be. I saw a lot of James Conner out of Jalen Warren this year, as far as in that backup role, and I think he's going to be a good piece. He could be a nice flex in favorable matchups. Gus Bus and Cordero Patterson might give you some decent weeks during some injuries and some bye weeks, but I mean, they're not anything to write home about. They're getting towards the end of their careers. I mean, Gus, he's had some injury issues. If he remains in Baltimore and he gets that RB2 role, he has a little bit more value because they love to run the ball there. Patterson, I mean, we kind of saw Tyler Algier take over. I don't know what his contract situation is either. Patterson, that is. So I'll have to see what happens there. The other guys are expendable. You could drop them, make some space. Maybe see if Melvin Gordon gets an RB2 role somewhere, but he's kind of in that category with Leonard Fournette where he's older in age, getting up there with the work on the body. He's not going to be a bell cow anymore. From the wide receiver standpoint, it's probably the weakest position. Barring any injuries, McLaurin and Amari Cooper are probably going to be in the lineup every week unless some major moves are made where other receivers come into this lineup. Hopefully Claypool finds some chemistry with Fields or Bryce Young. Hint, hint. DJ Chark, Allen Robinson, Russell Gage, Robert Woods, they're all low-end wide receiver 4s, wide receiver 5s. I mean, you could play matchups there, but even guys like Robert Woods and Russell Gage this year were guys like that you really couldn't rely on. Deeper leagues, I mean, I had to throw them in there a couple times, and I really wasn't happy with how those weeks came out. You could probably get rid of Kenny Galladay, James Prochet, and Noah Brown. They're just clogging up the roster right now. DeAndre Carter, he has very little value. You're really only going to see him if Keenan and Mike Williams both miss time at the same time because Palmer is the other guy that's going to step into that role, so you need Carter. after those other receivers are out. Tight end, the best position on the team between having with having Travis Kelce, you're not taking him out of your lineup unless he's injured or if he's on his bye week. And even on his bye week, he's probably going to have more points than a lot of the tight ends. And then Trey McBride is a nice up and coming tight end. He could be flexed in some spots, especially with starting 2 flex and needing 3 wide receivers. You could start Terry Cooper and another receiver, flex Trey McBride. I think he's going to get a lot more work this year, especially with the rumors of DeAndre Hopkins going, and we're going to have basically a new offense there with the whole coaching staff all fired. But like I said, if I kind of put Kelce in the same area as I would have put Eckler, where if you're struggling 1-5, 2-4 at the beginning of the year, maybe look to sell Kelce too. He's getting up there in age as well. See if you get some 2024 first round picks for them, maybe get younger too. And then unfortunately, as far as picks go, there's not a first rounder for this year. We do have a pair of seconds and a trio of thirds. I'm going to try to leave this draft with about 3 to 4 wide receivers if you hold on to those picks. Just take the best player available at those times. The players that land in the good spots that you're probably going to see some field time this year. And like I said, between Eckler and Kelce, maybe you could pick up some firsts for 2024.
Yeah, good breakdown. And Kyle, I'm going to go to you again. I know I was going to go to Zach, but he hasn't been here for the breakdown, so I don't want to just throw it on him. And he just got back from wherever he went. But what stood out to me, and I want to get your opinion on this, Kyle, Austin Eckler and Travis Kelce, I think I'm selling both of those in the offseason. I'm trying to get picks for this year. What do you think of that?
Yeah, and that's part of my thinking too with what Jerry said. Like, the idea of, I think, players like that, older players, you'll see the value increase in season, but Eckler was in full PPR, the RB1 this year, just barely ahead of McCaffrey, and Kelce was by far the tight end one once again. Those might be the type of guys that you could sell. Maybe not right now still. I think, the rookie draft fever is about to start in that value, but I think that could be something where their value will still be high July and August. As the season approaches, that might be the time when someone, they think back, oh yeah, they were the RB1 last year. Can they do that again? And that could be the time to buy them as the season's approaching. People are thinking of their lineups. So I think there definitely are good time frames to sell them. Maybe that's the off season, or as Jerry said, maybe that is early in the season. But I think that those would be key times to do that. Maybe especially with Eckler, still be able to, even if you're competing, be able to tear down with him and get another running back enough, but the plus on top enough to make up for those points and still be able to compete without him. That could also be the key to look at.
And you can capitalize as well on trying to maybe sell the hype of the draft picks. If you have the draft equity, say you want to have picks come draft time, you can find a way while still, gaining assets in the meantime. I'll usually try and flip off of hype and then buy back in at the last minute when people are like, maybe I'm not getting the guy I want here. So, yeah. There's plenty of time between now and when people are doing their rookie drafts where you can be aggressive and play the market that way as well while you're trying to find that potential suitor for running back.
Yeah, that's a good call. And I like your point too, Kyle, about the rookie fever, because you're right. The closer we get to the draft, people get in that crazy, picks become almost untradeable at some point. You can't get any of them. But July and August, the luster's kind of worn off. People are thinking, like, I need people to start. Austin Eckler and Travis Kelce definitely are startable options, and you can probably get a bigger haul than you could pre-draft. So, yeah, good call there. All right, let's get to the next team.
Number 9.
Number 9 team was ranked as high as 9, as low as 10. It is Tua, Touch My Chubby. And Jordan, this is your team here. Go ahead and give us your breakdown.
All right, yeah, A for effort for the team name. And when I'm looking at this roster, the 3 guys were just kind of touching on this too. When I'm evaluating potential trade options, I think the most underrated piece of getting a good deal is the timing of a deal, whether it's right before the trade deadline, around the rookie draft. So not only do I think a team should be looking at who they're trading, but when they're trading and what you're targeting. So I'll throw that in there into the mix because I think that's an important conversation here. Starting off with the quarterbacks, though, it's a pretty solid room here. One thing I will highlight, I'll talk about it a little later with another team. The passing touchdowns are 4 points. That changes it for me very slightly. A little more emphasis on guys like Jalen Hurts, who are a little more heavy on rushing touchdowns. So in this situation, with a guy like Lamar, the one thing I'm going to be looking at too is you really don't want to trade a guy when his value is in question. When you look at the quarterback room here, Lamar and Tua, when there's no question marks, it's a solid room. Two guys with injury concerns, longevity concerns at this point. So they kind of complement each other in an odd way. So I don't know if I'm making an aggressive move there. Probably where I'm aggressively looking to make a move for this team in particular is in the running back room. They're set up in the short term. You have Nick Chubb and Aaron Jones at the very top. Aaron Jones, 28 years old, had a few top 10 running back seasons over the last few years. This is a team who's really weak in the wide receiver room, so I'm going to look to really, if this team wants to be set up long term, investing in wide receivers, because that's the best way to be competitive over the long term in a dynasty league. And he really doesn't have many valuable young receiving assets. So I'm looking at putting Nick Chubb and Aaron Jones out there, seeing what I can get for him. He is only rostering 6 running backs as well and 16 wide receivers right now. So some of those back end wide receivers I'm cutting, taking a chance in the draft, and even taking a peek at the waiver wire, see if there's a backup running back, third string running back who has an opportunity to move up the depth chart through the season. Maybe you can dump him for a pick mid-season. So Nick Chubb and Aaron Jones, I think, are nice pieces to flip to get a little younger in the wide receiver room. Looking at the wide receivers right now, Mike Williams is wide receiver 1. Then you kind of have a bunch of questions. You have Cortland Sutton in the mix, Wandale Robinson, Zay Jones, KJ Osborne. A couple interesting pieces. A lot of about 5 flex level players and no wide receiver 2 or 3s in my mind. Not many anyway. So definitely, if you can get rid of the 2 running backs getting towards the end of their peak at this point, upgrade that wide receiver spot. You can still stay relatively competitive in the short term, set yourself up better for the long term. This team is missing a first round pick, I believe. So that's another consideration here. It feels like the kind of roster where he thought he had a decent shot to make a run this year, traded a first midseason, and it didn't work out for him. So, it has 2 seconds, though, and a third. So that's where I'm taking some shots on getting some of these young receivers in a very, very deep class. Or if you end up trading Nick Chubb and Aaron Jones, potentially hitting on some of those second round guys in the running back class this year as well. Tight ends, you have Darren Waller and Evan Ingram. I'm shopping both of them to see what the market's like in the league personally. Waller was pretty solid over the last 4 games when he came back, finished tight end 6, but because his season was cut short or he didn't play the entire season, I'm not sure he's at peak value right now. Evan Ingram, on the other hand, I don't know if his value is necessarily going to be any higher than it is, even though he seems like a potential long-term investment. If you can get somebody to overpay for him right now, I'm all on board with that. You have a little bit of flexibility having 2 solid tight ends in that room right now.
Yeah, that's a good call. And I want to go back to your running backs here, and just something that I want to point out that I don't know if these guys, spend much time on Spotrac and sites like that, looking at their contract situation and looking at Aaron Jones's contract. Either the Packers need to restructure it or he won't be there, because it jumps from a $8 million cap hit to like $22 million, I think is what the price tag is. So
yeah, it's the highest in NFL history, actually, for a running back.
Yeah, it's an insane amount. So either they're going to restructure him to keep him there, or he will be somewhere else. So take that how you will. I don't know if you want to try to move him now while he's with the Packers, or if you want to wait till where he gets traded. Whatever the case may be, Aaron Jones may not be a Packer next year, so that could change his value considerably. All right, let's go ahead and move on to team number 8.
Number 8.
Number 8 team, ranked as high as number 7, as low as number 8, and it is Zach Milfson. And Kyle, this is your squad here. Give us your breakdown.
It's funny we didn't get Zach to do this team, just the similar name. That's all. But he doesn't really want to be associated with Zach Wilson. I don't know many people want to. Luckily, this team doesn't have Zach Wilson as a QB1. And looking at the team, elite assets kind of at the three positions. So Justin Fields at quarterback, Ken Walker at running back, and a pretty good trio of Jalen Waddle, DK Metcalf, and Michael Pittman at wide receiver. I guess my concern is the depth beyond that. I mean, if Mooney comes back healthy from injury, he should be an okay starter most weeks. And then if Romeo Doubs can take that second year step up in year 2, that's maybe your 5 starters at wide receiver that you can play with, again, 3 minimum every week and then the 2 flexes. But again, after that, the next best receiver might be John Mechie, who still hasn't played an NFL game yet. So and the next one after that might be Justin Ross, who also hasn't played an NFL game yet. So I think that the depth at both positions really, like, Ken Walker and Brian Robinson, only 2 starting running backs, potentially Chuba Hubbard's a starter. And I mean, I guess who knows? Miles Sanders might be gone. Maybe Kenneth Gainwell's a starter. So you might have up to 4, but realistically looking at probably 2, maybe even only 1 starting running back, depending on what Washington does. So I think getting depth at both of those positions might be the key. Maybe it's trading away a Michael Pittman to tear down a receiver and get another pick, or Waddle or Metcalf. I guess the other thing too is at tight end, Isaiah Likely, Juwan Johnson, Hunter Henry. That's kind of, if you can play the matchups right, you might be able to get through the season with just those 3. I think Tommy Tremble, Brevin Jordan might be cuttable, and you could reduce it to just the 3 tight ends and really just play the matchups between the 3. I guess this team, in theory, if they wanted to upgrade a tight end, I would purposely look for top 6 tight ends only. So, Kelsey, I mean, Pitts is up there, but he's probably really tough to trade for. But aside from Kelsey, you've got Hawkinson, Kittle, Goddard, and Andrews. I don't really want to, like, to the team Jordan just had, I don't think this is the team that I would want to trade for Evan Ingram, because I don't know that Evan Ingram is that much better than, say, Juwan Johnson to make a difference of giving up anything when, again, this team really should be looking at depth at wide receiver and running back if they're going to trade. So if they're going to trade for a tight end, it's got to be go get a Travis Kelce, like go right to the top. I don't think a marginal upgrade is probably not in the best interest of this team.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. Jordan, I want to get your thoughts on this team a little bit here. So you broke down Lamar Jackson, and you mentioned the 4-point passing touchdown here. So he's got Justin Fields. What are your thoughts on this quarterback room overall, and your thoughts on Justin Fields?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a big Justin Fields fan. I think he's set there, especially in a scoring format like this. You could argue he's got a top 6 quarterback right there, right off the bat. The thing that's kind of interesting about this team overall to me, it is, I believe, the youngest team in the league. So I find it tough. There's not many high quality assets that I would necessarily define as declining at this point. It seems like there's a lot of guys who are just starting to maybe reach their peak this season within the next 2 years. So I think it's a really interesting team. It's either you got to sit back and wait, let some of these guys develop, and this team's going to become more competitive. I think it's a little disappointing they don't have a first round pick this year. I think that would have gone a long way for them. But if you can, the depth is definitely a concern for me. So if you can look at one of these higher end guys, even a Metcalf, Waddle, as much as you don't want to get rid of them, if you can get 2 younger guys and solve the depth issue while still being young and trying to stay competitive, I think that's a move you have to consider.
Yeah, I'm with you. And looking at his draft picks, he's got 3 second-round picks. He has a 205, the 211, and the 212. I wouldn't try to do it now, but as we get closer to the draft, maybe potentially packaging 2 of those seconds to move up, maybe even into the bottom of the first round, to try to consolidate picks and get a better player.
Or just outright trade for another young receiver that can complement and add a 4th real threat to this team, aside from Pittman, Waddle, and Metcalf as well. Or do you add those, add a second to one of them and get maybe a couple receivers, maybe like 3 players back, like you give it up Metcalf in a second to get 3 guys you could plug into your starting lineup. There could be some creative trades that way too.
Yep, agreed. All right, let's move on to number 7. Number 7 team ranked as high as 5, as low as 8. It is John H 78629, and Zach, this is your team. Give us your breakdown here.
This This one's tough. This team, it's really on the edge of either contending or cratering, and I don't know which way it'll go because they have just enough depth to be a team that, like, okay, I could convince myself they make a deep run, but they lack just enough depth where I actually truly believe that they'll be able to stay fully healthy and be able to compete for a full season. I mean, for example, at quarterback, I love Joe Burrow. I think you have your foundation there in a one QB league. I don't know if you need four. I mean, honestly, why not open that roster spot up at most three? I mean, does everyone agree there? Three is.
I mean, I don't think Bailey Zappi should be rostered in this.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know about you guys. Like, I don't think he has any chance to start next year. Like, he's going to be buried as a backup on the Patriots for 4 years on his rookie contract, and then he might get a chance to start after that, but probably not. Like, I'd just cut Zappi.
I'd rather stash another, flex guy, just a running back, maybe a third, fourth stringer, a guy that's just promoted from the practice squad, anyone that has a little bit more relevance in regards to fantasy, because Zappi, even when he was playing, you weren't going to use him. Come on now. In regards to your running backs, though, I love McCaffrey. I'm not sure if you always had McCaffrey and Elijah Mitchell, but that's a great combo to have. I like it there, but unfortunately, that's a double-edged sword with this roster because then it's, 1A and 1B between those two backs, and then you have Tyler Algier. And then that's where I'm looking at this roster, and I'm like, wow, if only they had another running back they could truly rely on. They have a lot of handcuffs with Kareem Hunt, Madison, Keontae Ingram, J.D. McKissick. Those are guys, I might sell to the teams of the who have the primary running backs, but otherwise, I don't know if there's really a benefit in rostering them yourself when you could really get more talent there yourself and maybe get, I don't know, a solid running back for. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, I'm 100%
I
with
believe
you.
Madison and Hunt are free agents, so they might find bigger roles somewhere.
Yeah, and I think there's someone that should just buy into it, but I don't know how much. I don't know. It scares me there to rely on this core for a deep run. Same thing
Madison
with wide
might-
receiver. Or go ahead, sorry.
Well, Madison might get a bump in value if he leaves somewhere else via free agency. That might be the bump needed to trade him away at the higher value.
Yeah, Kareem Hunt as well. I
Yeah.
mean, both of those. If those guys get
Exactly.
traded, I'm trading them on my team because that's when all the hype is there. Like, oh, he finally got his RB1 job. I'm trading him immediately. Get that high value out of him.
I forget there's more buzz around them than what I think. So you're right. I'm not in on either of those guys, so I'm not optimistic in regards to what that role is. Plus, we always have new rookies coming in. There's a lot of good running backs coming in this year for the draft class, and hey, I won't be more optimistic on them than I will some of those guys via free agency. With the wide receiver room specifically, though, I love the T. Higgins Christian Watson combo. I mean, I'm not going to repeat it too much, but I love Christian Watson. T. Higgins is a great foundational piece at the wide receiver position. I would look at maybe trying to trade Keenan Allen, Tyler Lockett, get younger. You have so many young pieces with Joey B, T. Higgins, Christian Watson, and like Algier Mitchell. I don't know. Why not just try and get younger all the way around, play it safe, and try and build for the long term where you're just nonstop a contender? Because right now I don't think you need to rush it, but I also see a lot of benefit in playing the patient slow burn.
I can see why Zach didn't get the team name Zach. He got the team with Christian Watson on it.
Yeah, I was just going to say,
Jeff.
It's good that we do these PLPs live now, right? Because in the past, Zach would go on and on about Christian Watson on every PLP, but the only people that ever heard it were people in that league. So now that it's live, anybody that is on Christian Watson like Zach was, everyone's going to know how much you love Christian Watson because it's going to be on YouTube now.
I don't have to state it. I mean, I don't even explain myself anymore. I just assume everyone knows. Hey, that's my guy.
Absolutely. All right, so moving on to number 6.
Number 6.
Number 6 team ranked as high as 4, as low as 7. It is Agent of Chaos 85, and Jerry, you're up.
All right, so decent quarterback room. Dak Prescott, he still has some fantasy relevancy. Interceptions were a little too high this year, but if they come down, I still like him. He can run the ball, although he doesn't do it as much as he did in his early years. And with the rumors of Odell coming there, and they actually brought in T.Y. Hilton, I think they're going to bring in another weapon for him. So I think that just bumps him up even a little bit more. Between having CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, and then another weapon on the outside for him. I like Dak for as a most of the season starter. Obviously, got to worry about the injury, his bye week, obviously. After that, I mean, Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love. You're going to get some weeks out of Aaron Rodgers. Jordan Love could be the guy in Green Bay, so at least that's a body if you need to play somebody. It's hard to target any kind of quarterbacks, but if there was a team that I would say to target quarterbacks, it would be this one. Maybe to replace your Aaron Rodgers or Love and get a better guy that you could have Dak Prescott and somebody else as a nice 1-2 punch. The running back room was middle of the road. Obviously, we all know Derrick Henry's a tank, but I'm going to say the same thing to you that I said about Austin Eckler. If you're starting off slow, first 6-7 games, 1-5, 2-6, whatever. Maybe try to move Derrick Henry. He's not getting any younger. He just keeps on taking a bunch of hits. He's not. I don't want to call him injury prone because he's not, but he has missed a few games, and he just keeps on getting fed the rock. So the more he gets fed the rock, the more hits he's going to take. So maybe see if you can move him to somebody that is contending, somebody that can give you a couple good pieces for a guy that, because I mean I think Henry still has a few good years left, but try to sell him while you could sell him high instead of waiting until he's done. You got Dobbins, Akers, and David Montgomery. Montgomery is going into free agency, so see where he lands. Another guy that, I mean, this is a really big free agent class for running backs. There's going to be a lot of movement as far as running backs go. Montgomery, I still like them. They're all very solid RB2s, maybe RB3s. Dobbins, we saw when he came back and actually was healthy, he was looking really good. Akers towards the end of the year, I mean, he helped a lot of people win championships. So if he stays in LA, I think that's going to be a solid move there. I know there was rumors last year of him wanting to be traded, but who knows? I mean, he's still under contract, so they'd have to move on from him. Rashad Penny, obviously, he's hit or miss. It's Kenny Walker's show now, so not too really high on him. If you do move Derrick Henry, definitely hold on to Hassan Haskins. I'm personally not a fan of handcuffing my own handcuffs. I like handcuffing other people's handcuffs. So I would hold on to Haskins while moving on from Henry. That way, if Henry does go down, you still have it. You got another starter that steps in. And then the other guys are expendable. You could drop them. Not even really trade options, just drop them. As far as the wide receivers go, definitely got some bodies here. Debo is always going to be a threat as long as he's on the field. We already saw 2 years ago he was a wide receiver 2 overall. He's got that potential. We saw a lot of talent with Jahan Dotson this year, even with the carousel of QBs out there in Washington. I like him as a solid wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3-ish. Deontay Johnson is a target hog. That's just, I think he's only going to get better with Kenny Pickett. Pickett's just going to keep on feeding him. DeAndre Hopkins is another one that could be on the move, see where he goes. But obviously, if he's on the field, he's always a threat. One of the top receivers in the league until he isn't. Gabe Davis is boom or bust potential, more bust this year than boom, but he always has that 150-yard, 2-touchdown game potential. So he might be a solid flex option every once in a while. Nico Collins could be the number 1 in Houston. Alec Pierce has the potential. Just got to get him a QB. And then we saw Shi Smith get involved a little bit in Carolina with his carousel of quarterbacks that he had this year. And then for tight ends, Mark Andrews is always a threat to be a top tight end. See who his quarterback is next year. Daniel Bellinger, Cade Otton, and Zach Ertz can all be plugged into the flex if they got favorable weeks. Or if you don't want to use one of those wide receivers down there, maybe try to move a guy like Ertz to a tight end needy team. I believe Arizona could be moving on from him, so have to definitely check in on that. They do like McBride. I forgot what Ertz's contract was too. I'm not sure. I would target Isaiah Likely from Zach Milson. I think he's more relevant I just said I don't like handcuffs, but he's more relevant being on the team that has Mark Andrews than he is by himself, I believe. Then you'll always have one of those two on the field if one of them is hurt. But yeah, I mean, Isaiah Likely would be a lot better on this team than he would be on Zach Milson's team, where he's picking between 6 tight ends to use, and he could actually handcuff Mark Andrews over here. This is another team that I got that doesn't have any firsts. He doesn't have any seconds either. He only has 2 picks in this round. So again, might be just best available. Target your holes, which are for the most part, it's really, I mean, see if you get one of the high end quarterbacks if they don't go early, or just get a nice wide receiver with one of those picks, and then like I said, look into trading Henry if you decide to go that way, and you could end up with a first round pick too.
Yeah, while you were talking, I pulled up Zach Ertz's contracts to see where he's at, and he's a $12 million cap hit next year with only a $4 million dead cap. So there's definitely potential that they could move him, especially the fact that he's getting up there in his career, probably wants to win a championship. I don't think the Cardinals are there. No Kyler to start the season most likely. D Hop's moving on, so there's a potential that he could end up somewhere where he has a little bit more value because this team's probably be pretty brutal in 2023. But yeah, I definitely like your points that you made about the tight ends, and Derrick Henry is the one that kind of stands out to me as well. I think he's the one I'm trying to move. Unfortunately, his value is a little bit depressed with this way the season ended for him, but I do think he still can pull a pretty good sum of parts there that you can get for Derrick Henry. So great breakdown there. All right, number 5.
Number 5.
Number 5 team was ranked as high as number 3, as low as number 8. So this is probably the team that has the most discrepancy, at least so far in the podcast. And Jordan, this is your team, and it's Come and Take It at number 5.
Yeah, this is a team that when I first looked at it, I think I was a little harsh on. When you really dive into it, there's a lot of really nice assets here, and they have a chance. They're in that middle right now, or maybe a 5 seed in the playoffs. But if they make the right moves, they can be competitive now and really set themselves up in the future. And really starts in the quarterback room. They have Hurts and Justin Herbert. To move right off the bat, you have to evaluate which one you want to move off of because that is probably the biggest trade chip right now that they have. They lack wide receiver depth. If you can move Justin Herbert or Jalen Hurts, you could argue Hurts' value is never going to be higher than it is right now. So maybe you decide to capitalize on that. Grab yourself a nice young receiver and a pick. This is another person missing a first round pick. So maybe one of those win now teams really looking to add to that quarterback room. So I think you move one of those guys, upgrade the receivers, and this is a team that's in a really nice position. I love the running back room. A lot of youth, a lot of upside, a lot of talent. The top 3, Javonte Williams, Tony Pollard, and Najee Harris. I think that's a great combination, especially if Javonte can live up to his potential. I think that could be a nice core over the next 3 years or so. After that, they do only have 6 running backs on the roster, so that's something else to keep in mind here. 6 tight ends rostered, only 6. Yeah, what is it? Yeah, 6 tight ends, 6 running backs rostered. So probably make some moves to add some depth and some potential in the back end of that running back room as well. Zeke is listed as the 4th running back on this team right now. You kind of have to decide if the value you can get for Zeke right now is more valuable, if you can grab 2nd round pick for him, or is he more valuable holding on to as a handcuff as a Tony Pollard owner? So I think that's an important decision to make there. I know I personally traded Zeke quite a few times during that hot streak during the course of this season. So I think that's another move you can look to make in this running back room. Wide receiver wise, at the top you have Tyreek Hill, Mike Evans, Juju Smith-Schuster, Michael Gallup, Tyler Boyd, then some depth pieces after that. Mike Evans is a guy I'd kind of play the field with, see what value you can get for him. The future of the QB there is uncertain, so you can really, once again, it goes back to timing. Do you take the chance now and trade him when there's a lot of question marks surrounding him, or do you wait to see what the future of that QB room looks like? You could argue that's a risk. Maybe they bring in a young guy, maybe they bring in a veteran that keeps Mike Evans' value stable, but it's a dangerous game that you're playing, so I'd at least play the field, see what you can get there. Get a little younger there. This is overall a wide receiver room where the average age is almost 28. So even if you can trade Mike Evans, get a little younger in that room, once again, maybe add a pick to boot, I think that's the deal that I'd be looking to make. Then in the tight end room, I already mentioned you have 6 guys here. A lot of interesting names. It starts with Kyle Pitts at the top, a guy you're probably holding on to right now and building and hoping he continues to improve and reach the ceiling that he's capable of. But you got Cole Kmet, Noah Fant, Mike Gesicki, Hayden Hurst, some serviceable tight ends. To some of those teams that are looking to make a push, maybe they're willing to trade you a late round pick this year just to solve that tight end issue. So I'd be looking to trade some of this depth and really, once again, add to that wide receiver room. I think if they're able to improve that receiver room with Justin Herbert or Hurts as their quarterback, Kyle Pitts, Tyreek, 3 young running backs, this is a team that feels like it's got a good balance of we can win now and be competitive over the next few years.
Yeah, very good points, and I agree there with the quarterbacks. I know it's a nice luxury to have, especially you had Jalen Hurts go down this year for a few games, so you were like, oh, I'll just plug in Justin Herbert and I'll be fine. But at the same time, though, when you have 2 quarterbacks, you can start one of them, you're sacrificing a lot of points on your bench, and if you can move one of those guys, both of those quarterbacks are young. So some of the teams that we mentioned early on that are in the rebuild stage, they could still take on a quarterback, trade you some of their older pieces, maybe included with an Austin Eckler type deal. You may have to throw a little bit more in to get Austin Eckler with the quarterback, but something like that where you can go for it this year. Because I do think this roster has the pieces to compete. I just think you're being held back by having 2 of the top quarterbacks there. You're not capitalizing on your points. Zach, I see you kind of shaking your head there. Do you disagree? You're on mute.
No, I agree. I'm just looking at the team that I'm going to be covering next. I see potential trade opportunities between these 2 rosters, just where it could be mutually beneficial. I think you got to move off of Hurts or Herbert. Each person kind of has their own belief as to which they'd probably rather go with, but I would just make that decision and go with it, because the longer you sit on it, the more you're hurting yourself.
Agreed.
It might just come down to which one you can sell for the most. That might just who is more valued in this league, and that's probably the one I'm selling, and because it doesn't really matter between the 2, so you stick with the less valued guy and get the most maximum return.
But
I would cut Cooper Rush, by the way. He's like even worse than Bailey's happy, or at least down at that level. Even if you're trading away your starter, you could figure you'd probably get have just Herbert or Hurts and Desmond Ridder, and try and find a cheaper way to get maybe a better third guy, someone who might be competing for a starting job, unlike Cooper Rush, who's very clearly a backup.
Yeah,
and I'll get more into my idea on what I'm thinking for this trade target, but I'll wait for that other team to be covered first.
You can't cut Cooper Rush because then he wouldn't have a Cowboy at every position.
Obviously, a Cowboys fan here, probably. All right, let's move on to number 4.
Number 4.
Number 4 team ranked as high as 4 and as low as 5, so pretty much right there is a consensus for all of us of where this team is ranked at, and that is Sam, Braun, Crow, and Kyle. This is your team.
Yeah, it's funny because even though this is one of the closest to a consensus, I actually had a hard time ranking this team, and I think this was the range where I had the hardest time between 3 and 6. So the teams I think we all view as probably playoff contenders if we had to pick, but maybe not quite the top 2 teams. So that mix, I think at one point I had this team at 3. Ultimately settled on ranking them at 5, in spite of the fact that it's my favorite name of the league. So I've always appreciate that. I think last year I got to cover this team specifically, so hopefully helped give some good advice if I did. But yes, Sons of Anarchy, and I guess every year we're growing up, this league is getting older and older, so less like sons and more like fathers almost. But so looking at this team, some of the teams I've talked about earlier is, okay, how can you get enough wide receiver depth to potentially start 5? This is maybe the deepest running back room in the entire league, and so this might be a team where you're ideally actually going to just flex 2 running backs every week and only focus to try and start 3 wide receivers. And as much as there's a couple older guys like Mixon and Cook, to the same type of advice Jerry was giving earlier, sell Austin Eckler, sell Derrick Henry. Those would be 2 guys right up in that same age range to look to sell. But if you aren't able to sell them and aren't able to get the value for them, it's okay to ride them out, because got younger guys already kind of maybe ahead of them on the depth chart, and DeAndre Swift and Ramondre Stevenson. So if that's something where you can't get the value for Mixon and Cook, I think it's okay to just ride them out and ride out that production if this team is competing. So might be able to do that really well. And even Jamal Williams, I think, is about to be a free agent. I think the same thing with Jerick McKinnon, although Williams might be able to leave and go to somewhere. Maybe not, he won't score as many touchdowns, but could still get the carries. I think McKinnon, we really want him to stay for his value, stay in Kansas City, but that could just add to the running back depth. So really in terms of things to do with this team, I would say maybe it's wide receiver depth. Diggs, Adams, Marquise Brown. I mean, that's 3 wide receivers that I would consider to be top 30. So we go back to the team earlier that I was talking about where you had maybe one guy in the top 36. This, at least you have the 3 guys there, but I would like to add a 4th top 30 wide receiver. Maybe the way to do that is actually trading Dalton Schultz. This is I kind of like this tight end room. Schultz, Dulcich, and Irv Smith. And I think with Schultz and Irv Smith, I believe they're both about to be free agents. Irv Smith coming off his rookie contract. Schultz played on the franchise tag last year. And I wonder if they end up in situations where their outlook isn't that much different. I think right now there's a big disparity in where Schultz ranked in Dynasty and where Irv Smith is. But their outcomes for next year may not be that different. So maybe banking on that by trading away Schultz, who would be viewed as the higher valued guy, and flipping Schultz into another wide receiver. Again, another top 30, top 24 wide receiver is what I would look for. And even if Irv Smith doesn't kind of come through, I think Greg Dulcich showed enough as a rookie I think we can maybe trust him as the tight end 1 on this team, as opposed to Schultz. Again, Schultz might leave the Cowboys, go into a bad situation, lower passing volume, not as much touchdown upside. Suddenly, Dulcich might actually just be the tight end 1 by default on this team. So maybe the best time to trade Schultz, and I mean, I guess revealing this to all the league if they're listening, but it might be before free agency kicks off. So this might be a trade that maybe want to make imminently. Trade Schultz right now. I mean, he's coming off some, like just last week, a big week in the playoffs. So this might be the time to sell Dalton Schultz.
Yeah, I want to go back to the running backs and something that you said, and it's something I've seen a lot in dynasty leagues, is you mentioned, Dalvin Cook and Joe Mixon, that it's okay to hold on to them. I see too much in dynasty leagues where guys get to that, that age cliff, and they become like they have the plague. Like people are just trying to get rid of them, get them off the roster. Like it's okay for them to retire on your roster. If you can't get the right value for them, don't just sell them just because they're old guys and they're not going to be, producing in 3-4 years from now. But it's okay to hold on to them, ride them out until they, ride them into the ground. If you can't get full value for what you think you can get for those 2 guys, just ride them out. That's what I would do. So very good point there, Kyle.
Ride them out like a Sons of Anarchy in a motorcycle club. Yeah.
I love it. Kyle's always bringing in those tie-ins. I like it. All right, so we're up to number 3.
Number 3.
The number 3 team, pretty big disparity here. We got it ranked as high as number 2, as low as number 6. And Zach, this is your team here. It's the 2027 champion.
Can I ask a question first off? Can you pull up what draft picks specifically they have?
Yep, I'll pull it up while you start your breakdown there.
All right, cool. Because I was trying to determine specifically how many and at what slot. But no, Trevor Lawrence. First off, love having him as your QB1 for the future. And I'll get more into what I'm thinking in regards to some ideas for QB targets for you, even though I think Trevor Lawrence can be your foundation there. At running back, I love the core of Etienne and A.J. Dillon. That's a great foundation. However, you don't really have another option. You have Keyshawn Vaughn, Ty Johnson, Benny Snell. A lot of just kind of up in the air. But luckily, that's where you have your draft assets. And Jeff, what are those?
They are 101, 103, 104, and 106.
Oh,
and he also has
it.
the 202 and the 203.
Good for you. Oh,
yeah, I probably should have ranked them higher than 6, knowing that.
Yeah, I apologize because I didn't realize, because I took different screenshots this time thinking I was saving time, but I didn't realize that when I sent it to y'all that the pick number isn't on that screen. It just says first round pick. So I apologize for that.
No,
I should have fixed that.
No, you're good. That's where I was wondering. I was like, that's a lot of first, and based on how this is. I couldn't believe also this wide receiver room. Oh, wait, you have 5 of the 6 first round wide receiver picks from this last class. Garrett Wilson, Olave, London, Jameson, Treylon Burks, but then he's also got Brandon Ayuk and Rashad Bateman. I love that wide receiver room. Honestly, there's a few other people in there I like as well. Few you can cut, but I'm looking to probably sell some of those wide receivers. It's great to have depth there. It's great that they're also young, but hey, do you want Bijan right now? I mean, I think you do. I think you're ready to go. I think we snag Bijan, maybe move back with another pick. You can just load up your. I mean, get greedy. Take the second round if you want. I mean, these are the kind of draft situations I love to be in, where you can kind of just trade back however much you want. If you want to fill your whole bench with the second round, you can. Um, but specifically, what he needs to address is the tight end position. I love Okonkwo. I love Conklin. Yeah, some of those guys are fun and all that. But look at specifically who we had at number 5. Come and take it. They have Cole Kmet. They have Noah Fant. Those are guys I'd be looking at maybe trying to acquire from them. But also they have Hurts or Herbert. And I was thinking, hey, maybe why not use one of those wide receivers in Trevor Lawrence to get a Herbert or Hurts and a Kmet or Fant, something like that. They're getting that tight end they need. They're upgrading at QB, and the team that's moving on from the Hurts Herbert combo, they're at least getting a solid backup option that has potential to be more as well. What are you guys' thoughts there?
Yeah, I like that, man.
I do like that. I personally like Trevor Lawrence, but if you could get Hurts with the 4-point passing touchdown, I think that's an upgrade for sure. I do like Lawrence's outlook going forward. I do think he's going to be a top 5 quarterback, top 6 quarterback going forward. But yeah, if I can get Hurts, I would do it.
Might even be worth it to like you throw in a second and get a third back, like make the round move back if that's what it takes as well. I was going to say something else about what Zach said earlier. Oh, just about Bijan, right? Like this does seem like a team that is ready to inherit the 101 in Bijan, so I wouldn't look to shop in. Only 5 running backs. I think there was a team I had earlier that had about that. So I think 5 running backs, 18 wide receivers, like that should almost be even. Let alone triple the size. So if I was this team, sorry Zach, I'll quickly say this.
No, you're good.
I would maybe use most of my rookie picks on running backs. Like this seems like the type of team that is ready to plug in some rookies right now.
Exactly.
That are able to get into the NFL and start producing right away. Like this would be the type of team this is the team that you could kind of take luxuries and just take whatever best running back available at every spot in the rookie draft, and knowing that you might be plugging them into your lineup right away this year. I think last year was a really good class to take rookie wide receivers, and it seems like he maximized on that. This year might be better to flip to the other way and get the rookie running backs in this class.
Yeah, and that's what I was alluding to earlier, where he's got so many draft assets in the first round and some in the second round already. You can always trade back, as it's getting closer and closer to your rookie draft day and all the hype's building up. You can sell those and double your cost. I mean, you could easily get 2 mid-seconds for a late first at some point. I mean, if you want to just get real greedy with trying to load up that running back room with the mid-second rounders, the guys that were the Tyler Algiers and that type from last year, I think that's exactly what I'm trying to do after I get my Bijan and 1 or 2 other guy in the first round. Just try and get greedy and hog as much of the second, third as I can. Let me just stash all the sleeper guys I like. Yeah, screw you guys. I'm gonna get selfish.
What's funny to me is we did some of those teams early on there, the 12 and the 11, and they look pretty bad on paper. This guy's he has the 101 and it's his pick. I'm looking at this roster like how did you end up as the last? This roster is pretty good compared to those ones we broke down early on. I don't know how you had such a bad season that you ended up getting the 101, but kudos to you and however you did it, whether it was tanking or whatever. But
I'm just looking at Etienne Dillon for the first half of the season. That was not a running back room that was winning you games. Over the back half of the season, maybe, but maybe he was already so far behind that the playoffs were out of reach.
And same with Trevor Lawrence. He wasn't too great to start the year.
Yep, fair point. I'm recency biased and thinking about what they were towards the end of the season, but yeah, that's a good call.
And then when his receivers were smashing is when those running backs weren't. That's when Drake London was at his best and Olave. And so if he had the end of season production with Etienne and Dillon with the early season production of those receivers, that might have matched into more wins. So just the team seemed to just never all smash at the same time, probably.
Yeah. I want to ask you, Jordan, real quick. With all these picks here, there's something I like to do, and I'm just going to get your opinion on this. So he's got so many picks. And he's got a ton of young receivers. If he takes all of his picks, he's just going to have a boatload of guys that he can't start, like guys on his bench that are really good that probably can't get into the starting lineup. So a lot of times I will move current picks to later rounds. So if I took, one of those firsts and turned it into a first and a second next year, just to kind of push my equity down the road a little bit so that I can allow these young receivers to sort of grow into their own and see which ones are going to be elite. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, when you have this much depth and this many picks, your options really are wide open. I mean, you can start looking at packaging guys together for guys that are up a tier. You can look at future draft picks. You can look at, even he's got 3 or 4 second round picks as well. I mean, it's a kind of situation where maybe he'd like to add a running back that's a little more surefire. Maybe he's not 100% sold on riding ETN and Dylan, and there's not a lot of, he's going to have Bijan as well, but maybe you look at getting a guy like Mixon or Cook cheap and, something like that too. So I think if I was taking over this team, I would balance it out probably with a little more of win now pieces. Not that these guys aren't going to contribute now, but I think you have a lot of flexibility there.
Maybe this is the team that trades for Eckler.
Yeah.
Just that just got me thinking, Jordan, when you said that.
Yeah, good call. And Adam is part of the league. He chimed in here with it's max points for max PF decides first, so he just happened to have the lowest amount of points possible for the season. Which when you're mentioning those points, Kyle, that I just was thinking recently, but you're right. He probably struggled early on, and that's how he ended up in the position that he did.
And then I guess maybe the lack of running back depth almost helped him in that sense, that he wasn't having these running backs go off on his bench and score points. Yeah,
exactly. All right, we are up to number 2.
Number 2.
Number 2 team was nearly a consensus, ranked as high as 2, as low as 3, and it is Moore, Purdy, Lambs, and Jerry. This is your team here.
All right, so for QBs, they're not the greatest, but I think we see a much better Deshaun Watson next year. He's going to have a full off season with little to no distractions. Go into Browns camp, be able to practice with the team. So whatever you think about him as a person, put all that aside. I mean, as a football player, I think we're going to see a much better Deshaun Watson next year. Brock Purdy gives you a backup to lean on. Who knows what's going on there, how far San Fran goes in this playoffs. One way or another, I mean, I think he's going to be on San Fran. So whether that's starting for them or backing up Trey Lance, it's still a solid body to hold on to. And then Handsome Jimmy, we might see in another uniform next year starting, so I would definitely hold on to him. Again, with it being a single quarterback league and everybody having 3, 4, 5 quarterbacks, can't really move any of these guys, but you definitely want to have another body or two that might get some starts. And if San Fran decides to go back to Trey Lance, Purdy doesn't really do you too well there, so you kind of want Jimmy G to go somewhere and be a starter. For running backs, I think this is one of my favorite running back rooms. I know Kyle had one a couple teams ago, but I like this one. Breece Hall, he should come back stronger. Today's medical technology has people coming back from ACLs, and it's not even like they missed a beat at all. Saquon Barkley is back to his normal self, and he stayed healthy all year. He's going to be getting a big bag of money this year, probably with the Giants, but he's going to be back. Rashad White, he has a chance to take over that backfield. I like what I saw out of him. He's a good pass catcher. He's going to be a decent running back on like I said earlier when we're talking about another buck. They're probably going to be in a semi-rebuild, and I think Rashad White is going to see a lot of the ball there, especially if Leonard Fournette's gone. Khalil Herbert could also see a bigger role with David Montgomery being a free agent. I think he steps into the RB1 role for Chicago. Pierre Strong should see a bigger role with Damian Harris being a free agent. We saw quite a bit of him between the injuries to Ramondre Stevenson and Damian Harris, and he looked pretty good in his time there. So you definitely got bodies. I mean, you only really need to play 2 up to 4, but you could definitely get 2 of these guys that are going to give you some solid output on a weekly basis. For wide receivers, it's another strong room. The toughest challenge is going to be finding which 3 to 5 to start each week. A.J. Brown, CeeDee Lamb are going to probably be in the lineup every single week. DJ Moore played really well with Sam Darnold. I personally think they bring him back on like a bridge deal. I don't know if they go for any of the high quarterback prospects. So they're either going to go with Sam Darnold or see what they got out of Matt Corral. I hope they stick with Darnold for DJ Moore's sake. But I think that if they do stick with Darnold, DJ Moore is definitely solid as a mid-level wide receiver too. Just has to be more consistent. He's Another favorite mid-round target of mine is Calvin Ridley, who is stashed on this roster. I think him and Trevor Lawrence are going to be magical together. They're not going to. I don't think they're going to click right off the bat, but I'm not going to panic trade them. I'm definitely holding on to Calvin Ridley everywhere that I have him. I have a bunch of Calvin Ridley. I was lucky to be in leagues where you could stash suspension in IR, so I was able to hold on to him. But even in leagues where you had to sit on your bench, I think it's worth it. I mean, we've seen a lot of good out of Calvin Ridley. I think he's going to be solid with Trevor Lawrence and might slip into that wide receiver one role. Michael Thomas is another one too. I mean, the Saints restructured his contract to where it's really movable. So I think they could trade him, move on from him, and maybe he finds a team where he actually wants to play and not fake all these injuries that he's been doing. Jerry Jeudy, he seems to have become Russell's favorite target. Chris Godwin, unfortunately, his QB situation is a bit murky, but I mean, whoever's under center, be a dummy not to throw to him. And then Elijah Moore, Rondale Moore, and Donovan Peoples-Jones are definitely worth hanging on to. I mean, it's going to take a lot. It's going to take like a Bimageddon to throw one of those into the lineup or a bunch of injuries, but definitely, I mean, they're solid bodies that could definitely put up points on any given week. Will Fuller and Jamison Crowder, I would drop them. Not really worried about them. And then for the tight ends, seems like I had all the top tight ends from the last couple of years. I had Kelsey on one team. I had Mark Andrews on another team. Now I got George Kittle. And if Purdy ends up being the guy, Purdy and Kittle worked really well together. I think they scored a touchdown in all of Purdy's games. At least one touchdown Kittle scored, except for the playoff game last week. And then Gerald Everett, he was a nice sleeper. He looked good. I believe he's under contract for another year. I think he's going to continue to get looks from Justin Herbert. He's got Gronk on his team. There's rumors of Gronk coming back next year. I'd hold on to him, see what's going on there if he comes back. If not, he's an easy cut. He's 33 years old. No big deal there. And then Jelani Woods, he's a nice stash. It's going to take a lot to play Jelani Woods, especially with having Kittle and Gerald Everett, but hold on to him. I mean, not really. Everybody else is carrying a bunch of tight ends, so you can't really move them for anything. And then the picks, he's got 4 2023 first-round picks. Really not much more I could say there. It's not the 101 because the last guy had that, but he's definitely got he got 108, 9, 10, and 12. So all later first-round picks, but still, I mean, we did a mock draft a couple of days ago yesterday, and there was value well into the third. So absolutely. I mean, you're definitely looking at some good picks there. You can move them for other players, but I'd see what falls to you first. I'd maybe wait till draft day with these picks because they are the later picks. See what falls to you.
I actually have a question for Jerry because you were talking about, Watson came back, looked rusty last year. As insurance, would you spend one of those first on a quarterback, even though it is one QB and, typically we won't want to spend rookie first round pick on a quarterback. When it gets those late picks, would you, maybe at 108, he gets his choice of rookie quarterbacks in this class, knowing the 3 other picks, is that maybe a luxury that this team can afford to take since they don't really have any glaring needs really at any position?
Yeah, I actually think, I mean, especially with Zach's previous guy probably going RB heavy, and this guy having a plethora of wide receivers, I think that going quarterback with one of those late picks is definitely worth it because he then doesn't pick again until the 4th round. And even if he picked in the 2nd round, he's probably looking at a late 2nd. So 2 of those quarterbacks might be gone in the early 2nd. So I would definitely go with a quarterback with one of those first, Bryce Young or C.J. Stroud, maybe Anthony Richardson if you like his upside. I don't think he's NFL ready just yet, but he might be. He has the biggest fantasy upside. Or you can use those picks to go pick up like a Henry or an Andrews, and everything just comes back full circle talking about those guys that I had earlier, trading for those guys for first-round picks. You have all the first-round picks. Maybe go trade for those guys.
Yeah. And also, Jared, the other thing you mentioned was about the deciding which receiver to play. I think this is the type of team where I would lean to flexing 2 receivers most weeks. If I can try and get just Brown, Lamb, Godwin, Moore, and Jeudy in the lineup every week. Yeah. You got Breece Hall and Barkley. That's probably pretty solid. So I'd probably look to try and flex as many receivers as possible.
Yeah, for sure. And he's probably going to get another 1 or 2 with those first round picks. Maybe not Jordan Addison, but especially if I forgot the last guy's name. I keep on saying the last guy. Especially if the last guy goes RB heavy, you're dropping wide receivers down. So he's going to be adding another one or two to this room already. He's going to be flexing two of them most of the time.
Yeah, good point. Kyle, real quick, I want to pick your brain a little bit because I know, you've been doing this with me for a long time. We've been doing it for 3 years. You're the veteran here, and I kind of know how you think. But one thing that stood out to me with these couple of last teams we talked about is roster construction. When you look top to bottom, they don't have a lot of roster cloggers. Like, even if you look at the team we're doing now, Jerome Ford is probably his lowest ranked running back, but he has long-term value potentially where he's at. Even down with Michael Thomas being one of those lower guys in the receiver totem pole, but just roster construction and in general. If you can just kind of quickly talk about your philosophy on that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I've already hinted at it. Liking depth at running back, especially. It seems like it's the position where a guy can kind of suddenly emerge 1 week just due to an injury, and you can kind of predictably start them. Whereas with the receivers, one guy gets hurt doesn't necessarily mean his replacement will immediately replace all that production and all that opportunity. So, even this team could probably afford, there are 12 wide receivers, 8 running backs. Again, I think strive for 50-50. And if anything, you should actually have more running backs than wide receivers. So I think there's maybe 2 guys I would classify on this team as roster cloggers. One's Will Fuller, who didn't even sign with the team last year. Like, you may as well consider him retired. So definitely a clogger. And then Jamison Crowder. I mean, he was on maybe one of the most explosive passing offenses in the league with the Bills and could barely do anything. So there's not really many spots where he could go. And I would just, cutting those 2, adding 2 running backs, suddenly it's 10-10, and you've got that perfect balance. So that's kind of I always talk about running back depth. Anyone who's been listening to these PLPs for years. But yeah, so and some teams are really pushing to the extreme, like only 2027 champion, that last team we just did, only rostering 5 running backs. There's a couple teams in this league that only had that. So those would be the type of roster construction I'd look to avoid and really push it forward. That not really wanting 18 wide receivers. I'd look to, I talked about the thresholds earlier. Again, if we say, can start 5 wide receivers, that's looking at wide receiver 60. If anything, I almost want all my wide receivers roster to be wide receiver 60 or higher, and anyone lower than that, just get rid of them. That would almost be like the extreme sense of anyone below wide receiver 60 is considered a roster clogger.
Right.
And if you've got 5 or 6 guys within that top 60, maybe 7 or 8, we'll say, that's your depth. And you don't really need much more depth beyond that, whereas you can really stretch the running back depth in as many shots as possible, because you don't know who that guy is that's a backup that emerges because the starter in front of them gets hurt. So you give yourself as many dart throws as possible.
Good stuff. All right, we have reached the top, gentlemen.
Number one.
Number one team was a consensus number one. We all had him at number one, and it is too many J's. And I'm assuming that must mean his roster's got a lot of J names in there, I'm assuming. And we have another J name that's going to be doing the breakdown here. Jordon, it's yours.
Yeah, last team of the night, and it's the first social I believe we had. So strong team here. I don't need to hit on the quarterback room too much. He's got Josh Allen. Gino backing him up right now. We'll have to see where Gino lands next season. I am all for having a good insurance policy at the quarterback position, and depending on where Gino signs, I think he can fit that mold, but have to keep an eye out on that. Running back room, got Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs at the top, Isaiah Pacheco, Zamir White behind those 2 top guys there. Wide receiver, strongest room here, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra, Cooper Kupp, Christian Kirk. I think the biggest thing that I would stress here is when you really start, there's a lot of big names at the top and in the starting lineup, but when you really start to break it down and look at the depth of this team, I do think there's some moves you can make, and you have the luxury of having these big names that you can, take a few younger guys, and maybe you take a Cooper Kupp who, to a lot of, you might get top 5 receiver value for him right now if somebody's really trying to make an aggressive push right now. And if you can get younger, add depth, I think that's really going to help this team's longevity in this case. And that would be what I would do, because when you really start to look at the starting lineup here, you have Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs, you start Chase Jefferson, Amon-Ra, a receiver, and then you have Kupp and Kirk, Christian Kirk, we'll say, in your flex spots. And then really when you're looking at the bench, you have Pacheco, which is strong, but then you have a lot of question marks at receiver and Sky Moore and Tyquan Thornton and Shakir and Velish Jones, James Robinson. So that would be the move that I would make. You're in a position where you have a lot of big names. People will pay up for these big names, and I would look to add some depth. I hope this guy doesn't like to draft too much because he doesn't pick until 2024 round 3. So even if you can pick up a pick or two in this draft while getting younger, adding some depth with some of these big names, I think that's what I would look to do. And depending how you feel about Josh Jacobs, you could argue that's another guy. You don't know if his value is ever going to be higher than it is right now. You're taking a risk with it. He's 24. You might get 3 top 5, top 10 running back seasons out of him, but it could also go in the other directions. I'm all for maximizing value, especially if you can add depth, get younger, and add to the longevity of your roster. We don't know where Jacobs is going to be long term, so there's a lot of question marks in my mind with him. So that's a guy personally I would look to shop.
Yeah, I like that. It's a great breakdown. This is a really solid team. I mean, this is like the team that you take over if you were to take this team over that you're pretty happy with. Personally, I like more picks, but you can't have the best of both worlds usually. So, but yeah, I agree. Zach, I want to get your opinions real quick on this team here, and then we'll do our dark horse picks. Just in general, why do you have Met 1? And looking at the teams as we did, breaking down, do you still have Met 1, or would you move somebody into one spot?
I love it. I love the wide receiver room. The wide receiver room is the main reason that I have them at 1. I mean, it just made me giddy when I saw Jamar and Justin on the same team. Like, how can you not love seeing that? Along with Amon-Ra, Cooper Kupp, Christian Kirk. I mean, it's just a stacked wide receiver room, and I love it. But the more I look over these rosters, the more in love I am with the team I had at number 3, which was the 3rd overall team, the one that
2027 champion.
Yeah, I mean, the more I'm loving that roster, because that, I mean, for our next, they're going to be my pick in the next portion as well. But I just love this team, and with all the draft assets they have, I think that's going to be a team that's going to only be better next year and could easily be just a true contender.
Good stuff.
I know the reason I ranked
one.
it at 1. Sorry, Zach, but the reason I ranked it at 1 primarily was you mentioned the wide receiver room. You've not only you've got probably maybe the QB1 and the RB1 in Dynasty, but I have Amon-Ra actually as my wide receiver 5 right now in Dynasty. And if you buy into that, you'd see this team was 3 top 5 wide receivers. So to get a collection like that of assets at the top, potentially 4 guys that are going in the first round of a startup, that's it's tough to accumulate that type of high-end assets. And maybe, if there's a lack of running back depth on this team, that's something that's easier to acquire at the back end. It's tough to get that many stud assets like that. Even like Zach said, just a team with Chase and Jefferson on seems really difficult to acquire.
Seems unfair. I mean, yeah, he has a potential QB1, depending on how you feel about Mahomes, potential RB1, Jonathan Taylor. He's definitely got the wide receiver 1 and Justin Jefferson, and then the wide receiver 2, Jamar Chase, and then his wide receiver 3 is Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's an insane lineup right there, and they're all young, and his team's going to be solid for quite a while here. I like it. All right, let's do our dark horse teams that we maybe didn't rank quite as high, or didn't quite feel as strongly about, that you think can make 1 or 2 moves here during the season or during the off season that could potentially win a championship. And we'll start with you, Kyle.
I was gonna say Zach already hinted at, so if he wanted to go first, he can feel free to take the lead on this.
Go ahead, Zach.
I would just appreciate it. No, 2027 champion. I mean, that's my dark horse. I mean, I know they're at the 3rd best team for our average right now, but still, I think that's the team I want most. I think they could easily win this year. Just so many of these young guys. I think there's going to be another big leap forward on top of adding in whoever the hell he wants from this draft class. And if he needs a tight end, there's plenty of great tight ends in this draft class. Same thing for running backs. So I mean, it's a great year to need running back, tight end, and I think this guy's going to just hit week 1 and he's going to end up being the biggest threat in the league, is what I'm assuming.
Yeah, I like that. I like that pick. Kyle, who do you have as your dark horse?
Well, and I think dark horse, okay, outside chance, and with one of the least likely scenarios in football team is that your entire team stays healthy. But Zach Milfson, we talked. This actual team I did. I specifically mentioned good elite assets, but very little depth. But if everyone's able to stay healthy, again, he's got the assets at the top end to be able to get into the playoffs. So, again, it's tough to bank on everyone staying healthy, which is why I think maybe we've got them ranked lower and they would count as a dark horse. But again, if that dark horse scenario happens and no one gets injured, this team could definitely make some noise in the playoffs.
I like it. Jerry, what you got for your dark horse team?
Despite the stupid Patriots logo, the John H 78629, again, kind of feeding off Kyle, need to stay healthy, but he's got potential top 5 quarterback in Joe Burrow, potential top 2 running back in Christian McCaffrey, Tyler Algier coming off a 1,000-yard season, Higgins, Watson, Allen, and Lockett as his wide receivers, Goddard, one of the guys that needs to stay healthy, but a top 5 tight end if he can stay healthy, and he's got a first. I don't know if he has his own picks, but he's got a first, a second, and a third round pick that he could definitely pick up some depth or make a trade and maybe fill in, maybe get another running back to help him out.
Good stuff. Jordan, bring it home. What you got for your dark horse?
I'm going to go with a team that I talked about. We have them as the number 5, and that's Come and Take It. And I think the big reason for me is they have pieces. They have a good running back room. If Kyle Pitts hits his ceiling, Tyreek Hill. I talked about if they trade either Jalen Hurts or Justin Herbert and capitalize on this value, this is a team with a solid starting lineup. It's a team that's got some depth, kind of covers all of your bases. So it's a team that can make it as the 4 or 5 seed, make a nice run in the playoffs, and take it home.
Yeah, you stole my thunder because that's who I had as well as my dark horse was Come and Take It. I would like having those 2 quarterbacks and being able to shop one of them around and see what I can get for them. The running back room is shallow, but a good running back room that I like. So yeah, I have Come and Take It as my dark horse team as well. All right, guys, that was our first live PLP. I think everything went smoothly. Hope the guys enjoyed it. I know a couple of them were in the chat. Appreciate you tuning in, and for those that weren't in the chat, I'm sure you're listening to this too on audio or on the replay. We appreciate your purchase. This is the 3rd year in a row we've done it, so continue. Hopefully we continue doing that next year. And we've kind of seen this team grow. I know Kyle's been with me since the beginning and has done this league a couple of times now. So definitely appreciate the purchase. And for anybody that's listening that's not on this league, if you want to get one of these for your league, goingfor2.com /PLP, which stands for Personal League Podcast. For a 12-team league, it amounts to about $8.50 per person. If you were to break it into your entry fee, it's pretty cheap. You can even book the day you want the live show to be, get your league all excited. It can be pre-draft, post-draft. We've already booked one for redraft season all the way in August. So just definitely check that out, guys. For the guys here, for Jordan, for Jerry, for Zach, for Kyle, I'm Jeff, and we will hopefully see y'all next year.